Well, hey, friends, welcome to the From Busy to Rich podcast. This podcast exists to inspire advisors like you to increase your profitability and the quality of your life, but not just for you, also for those that you serve. Joined today by just Wes. Justin's off this week. So, Wes, how are you, my friend?
I am great. We can get wild today. Justin's
no governor, no mute button. People don't know Justin's got the mute button, so no mute button.
The mute button, the beep button for Andy's.
That's right, explicit. If you see an E explicit, you're like, why is this episode explicit? Good, Justin.
Yeah, so it could get crazy. I don't know. I mean, I just got to pour myself a hot tea and caffeinated. So I don't know where this is going to go today. It's going to be awesome.
Okay. Buckle your seatbelts, folks. Like hide the children, right?
That's right.
Hey, we're going to talk about a topic today that is very practical in nature. And what it's interesting, the topic of communication, forming a talk, if you will, or presentation. There are certain people that, well, let me say this. I think that most advisors, if we said, hey, would you like to talk to like 20 people at a time versus one or two at a time? They're like, oh, yeah. And if we ask the next question, what have you done to prepare yourself to be good enough to do that in an effective way? They'd be like, nothing. Right. Yeah. They just stay in this rhythm of one at a time, two at a time, three at a time. And so today we're going to really practical on a skill that advisors, if they want to talk to a larger group, and again, it could be about finance, it could be something else. But these are the kind of things you have to start to get good at. You have to be prepared. Like I teach my players when I coach them in softball or baseball, you have to be ready before the ball comes to you. You have to be ready before the opportunity comes. So you're going to get some really practical examples of how to prepare yourself, how to structure a talk. But this also does apply in one-on-one conversations as well. So Wes, big topic here, how to communicate effectively. Where do you want to start us?
Yeah, I think just to give a little context to this, Andy, because if you're in this business, you sit through a lot of talks. Could be at kickoff to the year meetings, could be conventions or conferences you go to. Maybe you sit in a talk every Sunday if you show up at a synagogue or a church or something like that. And here's what I think intuitively, there are people that you could listen to for a long time, and there are people that when you listen to them, it feels like an eternity and not a good one. Like it is not a lot of fun. And you've probably been both of those. I know I certainly have in people's lives. The funny story is I remember when I was, young, 15 years old, and I was working at Blockbuster, and I remember we had Zig Ziglar tapes at Blockbuster, and I used to love, while we were opening the store, I'd put them in the little monitor and I could listen to it while I was stocking the shelves. And I remember just thinking, man, that'd be awesome to be able to move an audience with your words in that way, because Zig was so good about, just not just his points that were applicable and life-changing, but he made you just kind of sit on the edge of your seat and want to be a part of the narrative, the conversation. Yeah. I thought, man, that'd be pretty awesome to do. And then I remember my first real exposure to a big public talk was in my English class. And I had to give this talk. It was in my honors English class that before I wasn't allowed to be in honors English anymore, Andy, because my honors English teacher, when I was done giving whatever talk I gave, she said, Wes, you're a sweet boy. You should never do anything that involves speaking to people publicly, though. And so,
wow.
And the irony there, Andy, is she was right at that moment in my life. If I was going to stay doing what I was doing, and I definitely should not have spoke publicly to large audiences. But the other side is this. This year I'll do 25 paid speaking engagements, and it's not, and and this isn't because I have a natural ability or gift that I just showed up one day and it started working. This is that there is a pattern to quality communication that draws people in, that wants to make them listen. And again, you got to work it, and you work your voice and your inflection and things like that. But there is a pattern that anyone can learn that will make you far better. And by far better, I mean, if you're starting out and you say, Wes, I get an audience, I'm a 1, I'm a 2, it's going to make you a 6 or a 7 automatically just by following the pattern.
Yeah. What's so frustrating as an audience member, if you have any measure of discernment, is you'll know within about 30 seconds, maybe 60, how it's going to go the rest of the time. You're like, okay,
yeah.
I hope that they can't see my phone because I'm going to be on it a lot for the next whatever. Right.
Oh yeah. And you know what? It's so, I look and if, if you just could have reorganized it a little bit differently, how it would have gone so much more powerfully. And so because our objective, in our business, as you know, Andy, is to help inspire people to increase their profitability and quality of life. We think of this as whether I'm speaking for, 5,000 or 100 or 20 or 1, there is a quality rhythm to communication that nuances change depending on the size of the room and the people. But in the end of the day, I'm going to go over with you something that's been fundamental to helping me shape and reshape the way I communicate. And this is not my idea. This is a great book. One of my favorite absolute books, if you're watching the podcast, you can see it, is Communicating for a Change by Andy Stanley and Lane Jones. And for those folks that don't know who Andy Stanley is, he's a pastor of a really large church, community of churches actually around the Atlanta area. And, but he's also written a bunch of best-selling books. He's got a leadership conference that he'll bring on, some of the top CEOs and leaders in the world. So he is someone, if you're ever going to want to get better at communication, to just watch and follow, but he kind of gives you the recipe in this book.
I want to share something with the audience as well. Wes, you were recently featured on another podcast, which is Becoming an Elite Financial Advisor. And you talked about your journey. And part of it was training and spiritual leadership and teaching in that regard. And I was speaking to someone that's part of our Lead Advisor Network and about something unrelated to the podcast. They said, I listened to the podcast with Wes this week. And I always ask the question, well, what'd you take away from it? And I said, what'd you take away from it? And he said, I wish I would have gone to seminary. I wish I would have gone to something that would have helped me not just center myself spiritually, but also get better at presenting. He said, I feel like we really missed it in this industry because we just go start trying to sell something. So, like, what if we got better at talking about what we're selling instead of just understanding it? Because understanding it and then communicating it are completely different skills. And you feel, he said to me, it just seems like part of Wes's success is his innate ability to maybe ingrained ability. Innate is sort of like it happened naturally, like ingrained is now you put it in there. That ability
it's
to
ingrained.
Communicate. It is.
Yeah, it is
injected. Yeah.
And Andy, I think that's so, that speaks to where we'll go today, because here, I'm going to give you really simply, there are basically big areas when I'm putting together a talk, and I'm going to give this to you in a lot of different ways today, because it applies, whether you're giving a talk to answer the question, what do you do? It applies whether you are delivering a sermon series, like, we've been in this sermon 90,000 or this series 90,000. And if you've been listening to the podcast, you've been hearing us talk about it. And then I gave one of the messages at our North Point Community Church here. And with that, as I was preparing that, I used this framework. So let me give you the framework. Then I'm going to flip a couple of them around, and we're going to talk through each one of them as it relates to both even simply answering the question, what do you do, or creating a message. And we can even talk about how product and sales and all these other things that you want to do will fit into this framework.
All right, I'm going to call a timeout. Number one, Communicating for a Change. The book. You can get it used, you can get it new. It'll pay for itself in about 30 seconds. Like, it's just get the book. It's very easy to read, very applicable. Second, we always take what we talk about, and if you click on the description, it's going to be in the show notes. Everywhere, anywhere you're listening to this, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, whatever, it's there. I just want to encourage you, if you're hearing my voice right now or watching us, to pause and go on your calendar and put an hour, make an hour for this, order the book, and then do this. Like as Wes said, and I love what he said, Wes, they're taking from a 1 or a 2 to a 6 and a 7 in very short time.
Yeah.
You will just be way better real fast, So just be ready to apply. Please don't let it be one of those, good to know episodes. Okay.
Yeah.
So with that in place, let's now talk through these steps.
Yep. Yep. So here's the framework that I write down, or type down, I should say, in my Evernote app as I'm preparing to communicate a message or come up with one that is going to fit within a series or it's a one-off, whatever it might be. It always follows the same thing. Okay. And now I'm going to give them to you and then I'm going to flip to them. So you just need to know that in advance. If you're an order person, this order will change slightly. It is, what do they need to know? Number one. And when I say that is, what is the one thing they need to know? Because we don't want 50 things. We don't want 100 things. We want one thing. And I'm going to come back to that. Why do they need to know it? Why do they need to know it? What do they need to do? Why do they need to do it? So let's just start with those things. Okay. So first, the things I'm going to flip around are the first two. I'm going to flip around. Why do they need to know it? And then what do they need to know? Every time you're going to communicate information, you need to start with why. Sometimes the reason all your great ideas, your product, your service, your ability to execute upon something doesn't get any traction is because it's like you're running around answering a question no one is asking. And if you've ever noticed great communicators that do this, what they do is they build a tension. They build a tension that's also got a common ground around, hey, you know how we all struggle with this thing, this problem, this idea, this issue. And you know how you kind of build that out and you're going, I do struggle with that. You're kind of, one, you're coupling with that person. You're saying, hey, we're in this together. And two, it's like you're talking about the weight of a problem that is not yet really permanently solved in their life. So every great message, you want to start out by building that out. I'm going to give you some examples of that before you start saying, all right, number one, I'm going to teach you about these things today. Here's a great point because you're answering a question they're not yet asking. And every aspect of our client communication, public communication with large groups of people, answering the question, what do you do? All those things fit in this one thing. So let me give you examples, Andy, real practically here. So let's just use somebody ask you the question, hey, what do you do? Well, if you're going to start out with why do they need to know it? Because you could say I'm a financial advisor, and give a label, right? Or you could even say, hey, I solve tax problems, or you could say I'm a whatever business owner that solves tax problems, whatever it is. Or you could do this. You could say, hey, you know how it's easy for a lot of your profitability to disappear to the tax system? And they're going, yep, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Isn't that different than me making a statement? Because listen, Andy, with all my heart, people will believe their answers to your questions far more than they believe your statements. And so what we need to do from a communication standpoint is help them ask the question. Even when you're giving a public talk in a room full of people that asking questions nobody when I'm up there teaching at North Point's like raising their hand and going, hey, I got a question. You know, if they did, that'd be awkward and weird. I mean, I guess we'd deal with it.
Yeah.
But
you'd be okay. You'd be able to.
They're asking themselves questions while I'm talking because of what I'm saying. So you want them to be asking questions that go, this guy gets a big problem that I'm struggling with personally, and he struggles with it too. And so you're starting out with that kind of atmosphere. Let me tell you this. Let's say it's like the message tonight. So you guys, it's great. You can go back and listen to last week's podcast. And that was me delivering the message. That was the third part in the series, 90,000. And by way of recap, 90,000 is the number of hours on average, if you live to age 70, that you'll spend working in your lifetime. It represents a third of your waking hours, so pretty significant. And what we said in that conversation where I started with things is I really teed up the why before I got to what. The why was this. Hey, guys, we're going to spend 90,000 hours working anyway. And for most of you, if I was to ask you the question, how's your 90,000 hours going? And we looked at a bell curve. Some of you, very small percentage of that bell curve would be, I'm super satisfied. Life is an exciting adventure I get to pursue. The other side of that bell curve, it's a penalty box between weekends. And then most of you fit somewhere in the middle, which it's like neutral. I'm working to survive and provide. But here's the thing. All of us, if we could, wouldn't we want to be on the right side of that bell curve if it were possible? Wouldn't you rather life be an exciting adventure you get to pursue rather than an endless set of problems you solve? So what you're building there is, there is that tension, right? I'm giving them why, because everybody can identify where they work. Everybody in that room was either happy with their work, was satisfied most of the time, unsatisfied, felt like a penalty box between weekends. And a lot of them felt like it was somewhere neutral where it danced between both of those. So you kind of start there to where people are leaning in and going, yeah, no, I fought. What do we do about it? Like, help me, help me. What is next? So you're always going to start with that. Hey, why do they need to know it? Before you talk at all about what they need to know. Does that make sense, Andy? Does that resonate?
Yeah, part of it is, I've heard the phrase, take them to Disneyland. Wouldn't you love, the little easy ones. Wouldn't you love to know that when you stop working, you'll have a consistent income? Yeah, I would love that. Right.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you love to know that your family would be taken care of no matter what happens to you? Yeah. Wouldn't you love to know that, you can help your kids as they start off on their journey of adulthood? Yeah. Now, these are obviously questions that lead towards sort of financial conversations.
Yeah.
But there are questions that I think here's the nuance is you have to ask questions that are deep enough that people don't talk about them very much, but they're there.
Yeah.
Right. Like people will talk about their work sort of superficially, but to really say like, wouldn't you love to love your work? People don't talk about that, and it's like, but people think about it all day long. Right. I love it, Wes.
Yeah, no. And so it lives in there. So I'm always even if I know the thing I want to communicate, the one thing, I'm going to spend like a ton of time building up why they need to know this. Because it is, they'll never hear that one thing many times or think it's applicable unless I start there. So why do they need to know it? You got to start there. Then what do they need to know? And again, what I love in the book that Andy talks about all the time, what is the one thing they need to know? Because, he kind of plays on like pastor world. A lot of times it's like, yeah, here's all the, if they set up the tension at all, which many don't, and just because they're not wired that way, or they inherited approach to preaching that wasn't necessarily in line with their objective. Maybe many of you listening inherited an approach to how you do your meetings, how you answer the question,
100%.
how you approach that isn't serving you as well as it could. And it isn't because like that was bad or wrong. It's just you inherited it and started using it, but there could be a better way, right? And if there was, wouldn't you want to know that better way, And so that's kind of where we go today. So the one thing they need to know, instead of saying, well, there's 4 points. Point number 1, love your wife, don't ever leave your wife, and by the time that you get to point 4, they're done. They forgot point 1 and 2, right? So if they just make a series out of it, if that's where you want to go with things, right? But if you have one point that you can anchor back to constantly, or more powerful, even if you talk about a lot of other stuff. Yeah. Every presidential campaign, good ones anyway, regardless if you like the person running or not, what do they always have? What is Donald Trump?
They have a slogan. They have. I always think about on both sides of the aisle.
Right.
Obama was about hope.
Oh, hope. And he was the master at tying everything back to hope. And then he would tell you all the things that were going wrong in the world and why. He would always start his talks, this is happening and we've seen this. Well, now we've got hope. Now all the problems are going to be solved by this. Or Donald Trump can get up there and talk about, hey, how this is bad and we don't have this and the inflation and all these high rates. We can make America great again. And it ties it back. Now, regardless of if it's even applicable or true in any of those instances, it's memorable and portable. And everybody's going to say, okay, he said a lot of stuff. I'm not sure I know about it all, but man, that we're going to make America great again. We're going to have hope and change, whatever that might be. This is no different. And what, from the standpoint of like, you want an anchor point that's going to stick in their minds to go, that's the one thing. So let me just help you with this. Again, if we're in that conversation answering, what do you do? All right. And so what do you do? Well, I'm going to start out by telling them what I told you. I'm going to, why do they need to know it? Well, how it's easy for a lot of our profitability to disappear to the tax system. They're like, I know exactly what you're talking about. Or what you're talking about. Well, we help people with strategies that help with things like that. We help people with strategies that help people with things like that. And then I can expand a little bit. I can play with it, but that's my tie-in, right? That is the point. Is Wes is a solution to those kind of problems that I just outlined, that I just heard him talk about. And I say, now we own a financial planning company. We work with people that own businesses to help them align them with strategies that matter most. But what they're hearing is, I know I got taxes that eliminate a lot of my profit. Wes's team helps people with things like that. And he's probably got a lot more stuff underneath there.
Yeah.
So you need to know, you need to have your time. What is your one thing that you're trying to back to? Now with like you use the series we've been in, and you can go back and listen to me talk about this. I set up the whole first part about, gosh, we're either super satisfied or super unsatisfied or somewhere in the middle. And if there was a way where we could live more on the right side than the left, wouldn't we want to? And then I said, so to do that, I'm going to tee this up. I'm going to talk about some life things. And I kind of talked about this gap we have between where we are and where we want to be that never goes away. It just moves. And if we're not careful, we can live a life where we are pursuing, or we're thinking of our work as an endless set of problems that we're trying to solve, rather than an exciting adventure we get to pursue. If we're not careful, if we don't leverage this correctly, we can pursue a life of work that is the inverse of what we want. Because what we really want is to pursue, have a life that's an exciting adventure we get to pursue, rather than an endless set of problems we get to solve. So you can dance with the one thing and say it different ways over and over again.
Right, but it always goes back to that one thing.
Always go back to one thing. And then you're going to talk about how to do it. Right. But until then, until you get them to go, that's a problem. It's a tension I feel. It's a weight I have. Wow. There is a solution to this. There is somebody that does this thing. And you can actually, yes, I would like to live on that side of the gap, or I would like to not have profit to make my taxes disappear. Right. Profit. Either way, it's that discussion. So in any good talk, in any good communication, you got to know, why do they need to know it? What do they need to know? Then we're going to move on, unless you have anything you want to say there, Andy.
No, good.
Then we move on to, what do they need to do? Because that's great. Wes, that is a problem I want solved. You work with people to help solve problems like that. What can I do about it? Help me. In fact, if you set those first two up well, Andy, they will be leaning in so hard because they're like, solve it. Yes, yeah. I do feel the tension, and I do want to have a solution to it. And so, a couple ways this manifests when it comes to like the what do you do question is to say, well, listen, we start by asking you a lot of questions about where you are and the future that matters most to you that you're trying to move forward to. And once we understand that, we can have some great dialogue around the areas of planning we specialize in that may be best aligned with the future you're trying to create. And then here's where, so what have you just given them? You've given them, hey, well, here's how we do it. Yeah. And so you're speaking in the form of it. Start asking a lot of questions about where you are, where you're trying to be, what future you want to create. Once we know that, we can have great dialogue around the areas of planning we specialize in that may be most useful to what you're trying to accomplish, and go from there. And then here's where you can dance a little bit between the what do they need to know and why do they need to know it. Because what I oftentimes here will do is dip down into the why do they need to know it, and then I'm going to come back to the what do they need to do. Okay, or what do they need to do and why do they need to do it? So here I'd say,
what about what's an example of this being done horribly?
Yeah, well, so specifically, Andy, that is where you'd say, hey, let me give you an example. It's literally those words that would come out of your mouth. You'd say, let me give you an example. We had a client that when we were talking to him, we were onboarding him. He's a brand new client. We learned that he has 4 kids under the age of 18, variety of ages, but they all work in the family business. And when I asked him, hey, do you pay your kids? And he's like, yeah, I pay for their soccer and their band and their ice cream, and school, and insurance and gas and all those things. I said, yeah, man, I get it. But did you know if they are doing work for your business, you could pay them as much as $14,600 a year in 2024. And that would be about a $58,000 tax deduction and at a 37% rate like you're in. That actually creates $21,000 that was unnecessarily going away to the tax system.
And by the way, your kids are going to have some money that they would have had anyway.
That you would have given them anyway. And now you're just pushing it through to them through a legal channel. So most people at that point, they're going, that is a good why. Okay, I want to know more, right? So what you're doing there, just to come back to the format, I told them, what do they need to do? And I gave them basically what we meet with people and we ask them a lot of questions, find out where you are, where you're trying to end up. what future you're trying to create. Once we know that, we can have some great dialogue around the areas of planning we specialize in that may be most useful to what you're trying to accomplish and go from there. Let me give you an example. Now, I want to point this out, Andy. When I say, let me give you an example, I am dipping down to the why did they need to do it section. That's where I'm saying, hey, if you do this, like we ran across this guy, it's going to save you $20,000 just going away to the tax system, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're going, okay. And then I go back up there to finishing out what do they need to do? I say, hey, and tell you what, if you want, we can connect sometime in the next couple of weeks in strategy session. I can just show you. And so you're giving them an action. And when you've done it that way, you know what they say? Sounds great. Yeah, no, I'd love to connect with you on that stuff.
Yeah, because you've identified that they share, they agree on the need.
That's right.
Right. And then you've said, hey, I have a plan for this.
That's right.
Here's some numbers to back up what its value is to you. I mean, Wes, I literally had a conversation, it was a 2-minute conversation with some office mates the other day because I just moved my car insurance because I got a bill and it was way higher than it was the last time I got a bill. And I called and I said, why did it raise? Did you like something? No, we just raised it. Okay, bye. And I said to my friends, hey, when's the last time you reviewed your car insurance? Oh, I don't know. Like, you think you might be paying too much? Well, actually, I think I might. And then I gave them, I'm like, well, I saved like $800 a year just by like making 2 phone calls. And they're like, oh, okay, tell me more. And it's that very small, like agreed upon need. Yeah. Here's the path. Here's a number. And then they're like, what's the name of your person? Right. Yep. The difference is you're the name of the person in this situation. Right.
Yeah. Well, and Andy, it's just fundamental to humans, right? When you can now think you could start that conversation out completely different and it's just not going to have the same attraction that it does the way we frame it up here by just keeping these things here. And let's translate this back to if you're giving a big talk. And again, I'll use my example from last week on the podcast where we did the 90,000. So when you get to what do they need to do? So one, you've built all this, hey, you know how you'd rather spend time on the right side of the curve than the left side? You know how if you're not careful, work becomes an endless set of problems that you're trying to solve instead of an exciting venture you get to pursue, and you'd rather it be the opposite side? Jesus has a way forward in that. And he actually invited us into a relationship to show us how to do that. And you can kind of begin. So everybody's like leaned in. Yeah. Show me what he said. Show me what he said about it. And then you give a practical way that they can apply those life principles. And what we said in that talk is, hey, you got to have an exciting vision and a grateful condition.
Yeah.
An exciting vision and a grateful condition. You need to know, hey, what is it that I'm moving towards? And at the same time, you need to count your blessings from where you're starting from today, because it's the equation for contentment. Big ambition and grateful condition is a requirement for contentment. And if people kind of know that and they begin to go, yeah, and I can make a list of those things I'm grateful for, and I can write out a 90-day or a 3-year vision and back it down. Right. Give them very practical tips. And again, you can go back and listen to it, but then we did the end, which is why do they need to do it? Which is where I give an example. I give a story. Examples are great things that cause people to lean in to go, and that's why. That is a beautiful story that expresses the why, which again, you guys can go back and listen to the story. I won't ruin it for you if you haven't listened to that one. But just know by the end, you're going to go, wow, that works. It really works. And imagine if we were to do that. This is another great way. You say, hey, can you imagine if we get this one thing right, Andy?
Yeah, that's another part is there's so much that's internal in people that if you are in tune to that and you can pull it out, people want to know, like, why do people say yes or no to buying or, to taking action? It's because you've tapped into something that is inside of them and you've pulled it out and said, okay, I know you have a vision. I know you want this, right?
Yeah.
Here's the path, right? Here's a decision you can make. Here's something that you can do to actually, because here's the other part. And I, we talked to a lot of advisors. You do, I do.
Yeah.
So many of them go, well, I mean, they could just do it on their own. And I go, yeah, but did they?
Right.
Have they done it on their own? What if I tell them all the things they need to do? What if they'll just go do them? Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably 0.01% will. You know what I mean? Meanwhile, you can get 99.9% to people of people saying, okay, help me.
Yeah. Well, even think about this, Andy, and you talk about inherited approaches. I mean, my early days, 21 years ago, there was a guy and he taught this approach. I still hear people say this occasionally, like, hey, somebody asks you what you do. What do you say? And this guy would be like, you tell him I'm a life insurance salesman. I'm a life insurance agent. And you don't be ashamed of that because it helps people. And what he was saying as far as like it helping people and that it was important and people were going to do it without him, was all true. But the way he served it up made it so unappealing that no one was going to lean into that conversation, right? I think that we need to think about should a person need life insurance to take care of the hole that the primary breadwinner would create or a business partner would create. Those are really important. It's true, but I'm never going to get there by starting with this weird back end thing. It's like, why don't we talk about something everybody's going to lean into, and then get there? You know what? I think at the end of the day, I can end up connecting a whole bunch more people with things like that they need. So it's like, it's not that you're ashamed of it. You're just smart and you understand if they're ever going to get it, that probably the best way forward. It's kind of like if you have a crazy uncle, and everybody has a crazy uncle, and
I do.
If you don't, you're him. But at holidays, and they have like a political opinion or an opinion about the economy or whatever it is, and they're like, and they're idiots, right?
Yeah.
And then you ever ask them, hey, what thinking led you to that point of view? Because you could say, hey, you're an idiot back, but then you're not really saying like it's not an attractive form of communication. So what this framework does, and it works in the conversation as well as a presentation on a stage, is it just creates a framework for healthy communication, whether you're giving a message or you're answering the question, what do you do? Or you're taking somebody through a strategy session where there's more interaction, you're dancing back and forth. And again, this is a way, we teach a whole class on this, Andy, called Transform, as you know. And again, you can go check that out at wesyounglive.com, where we show you how we integrate this particular thought process into our entirety of our process. Because it is so critical to success in creating a holistic fee-based financial planning practice and enjoying the process of it. And if you just sign up for it and you go through it, it will radically alter your enjoyment of the work you're doing as well as the profitability you create. So
one thing that you did not talk about in detail was the start.
Yeah. Oh, I love it.
Let's end with the beginning.
Yep.
What about, well, before we get to that, is there anything else that you do or could do to help people, and let me challenge people with this. There's probably a conversation you had with someone, or there is a talk you heard that if I said, remind me of a talk you remember, like tell me about a talk you remember, that there's one or there's two, but they're not 20, right? So what can you do to help people remember yours?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so lots of little good takeaways on the kinds of messages you're giving or the environment. But like in talks, like as an example, gave away little cards that were laminated that had a real simple short quote that reminded them of the main point of the message. And it was a takeaway. They walked away with it. So they had something tangible that even though we made the one point, but they had it in their hand, right? It just triggered it. Which is why I love quotes, because they're like a pithy pointed statement that speaks to deep truth often. And you're not going to remember every line of the person's deal, but you'll probably remember some of the stories. And that one quote's going to go, and this is what it mattered. This is why it made sense, because I want my work to be an exciting adventure I get to pursue, not an endless flow of problems I'm trying to solve.
Yeah.
I want to have more profitability because I'm paying less in tax. And so again, you're constantly coming back to these little, hey, and here's just something I can give you to help you remember. That can be stickers. It can be we give away hourglasses on them that often say you run out of time before you run out of opportunities.
Yeah.
As just a metaphor that sits on their desk. And I go into people's offices and they have those hourglasses and they're like, hey, remember this? It's true.
All right, here's one. You ready? For those on YouTube. Oh, I got one. Man, I was given this, Wes. I was given this. Gosh, it had to be over almost 20 years ago. Can you see what this is? Do you know what it is?
Looks like a big paperweight piece of steel.
It's iron, steel iron. It was in a staff meeting at a church I was working at. And then it said, hey, I want you to have this because like it gives you a sense of the weight of iron.
Yeah.
And it was about iron and sharpening iron from scripture. And it wasn't until I got this. And I'm like, this thing's freaking heavy. You know what I mean? And the principle was like, we say like, iron sharpens iron. You should do that. Like that hurts. When iron touches iron, it's not light. It's not like, a feather touches a feather. No, like it's painful, right? You're being sharpened. But I'm like, this is 20 years later. And I always have that thing wherever I am, working. And so I just want to encourage folks like, gosh, that's expensive and everything's digital nowadays. And all the more reason to take that extra step to make sure people remember. All right, let's wrap up with the introduction. What its role plays in the last few minutes here.
This is really critical, Andy, especially if you're giving talks to think about. So we just talked about like a great format, but oftentimes you could have built it as wonderfully as possible. But if you just jump straight in that format, you're going to lose a lot of people. And so as an example, I'm going to give you a few. The best question you can ask is like, what is my relationship to the audience that I'm communicating to? What is my
relationship to the audience you're giving? That's how you start understanding the introduction.
That's right. Because think about this. If I'm, so I'll use our North Point as an example. I probably communicate there at most every 6 months. Sometimes it'll be more than a year. Just depends on the flow. And how mad they are when I get off stage from the last talk. There's multiple things, but with that, there's a whole bunch of people in the room that have no idea who I am. They have no, and some people have seen me. I've got a good connection with. We've been, up there before. So in something like that, what I'm going to do is I want to give them a little bit of me up front that they can go, okay, he's kind of like us.
Yeah.
Because you remember the Seth Godin is people like us do things like this.
Yep.
And so you kind of want to get there. And again, you're being authentic. So we usually get up and I'll make like, here's an example. I'll say, hey, listen, if you know me, my name's Wes. I'm not actually not on staff with the church. I'm not a pastor. I'm a volunteer.
Yeah.
I volunteer and I'll give on the executive board. I host up here sometimes.
Well, let me pause real quick before you even get to that. You just did something that connected with almost everyone other than the staff, which is, he's just like me.
That's right.
And no offense to the paid holy people, the PhD.
Right.
But,
professional Christians. That's what we say, right?
Right. So, yeah. He's like me. He's just a guy. Okay. All right. So you're just a guy. And then what?
Yeah. And then I say that, and then occasionally, every now and then, when all the pastors need to go on vacation and they can't find anybody else, you guys get me. And so, and everybody laughs, but it is true. It's like, hey, they need time off.
It's only funny because it's true. Right.
Yes. And then I'll usually show a picture of my family and like, if you watch the last one, we do another joke in there because that's kind of my personality type I said, hey, here's my family of 4 and we're at a football game and I kind of talk about the kids and Jamie. And then I'd say, now, believe it or not, one family member was missing because he wasn't old enough to go to the game because after 21 years of marriage, and a 18 and a 20-year-old, we actually have a 5-year-old. And everybody in the audience kind of goes, and you go, yeah, we were surprised too. We really were. In fact, here's a picture of my 5-year-old, and then I'll bring up a picture of Ollie, our French bulldog, right?
Yeah.
And so what you're doing with people that don't know you is go, he's like me, and I kind of like him. He's normal.
The guy with the dog. Yeah. Just the guy whose wife talked him to getting another dog. Yep.
Yeah. And so whatever that you're connecting on that level, and then you can get into the meat of the message, but it's real important to do that. And now here's another way. Like I'm going to speak tomorrow for a group of guys that I know one of them pretty well, reasonably well, but I don't know a lot of the rest of them. I know they're in various stages of their journey in this business. And one of the things I know is the first thing I'm going to do is say, hey guys, I'm happy to get to communicate with you today. What I'll do is give you a little background on like what things are like for me today in our practice. And then I want to talk about what they were like when I came into the business some 21 years ago, because I think what you'll see is there's a pretty big gap between there and now. Mm-hmm. And there are just some core things that we implemented along the way that have helped accelerate our ability to get here. that if I knew a lot of these earlier, I would have done it faster.
Yeah.
And so what that one, it'll do two things. One is they're really going to see like, God, if he can do it, where he started running, this should be easy. I've got no excuses. And the other is like, it's like, hey, okay, yeah, Wes today has 12 people that are a part of this team, and they've got this, but he started with one, like he was him. He was the staff.
Yeah. And you have to, people want, listen, superheroes are great. But they're kind of like martyrs. Like you appreciate them, but you don't want to be one. You know what I mean? Like, so the superhero, the problem with superhero is it's unreachable. Well, of course you're Superman. You were born on a different planet and sent here and right?
Right.
So you have to, part of your introduction has to say, here's where you fit into my story. Here's where we overlap. Right. And if you can't overlap with someone, in my opinion, I have a very hard time receiving information from them because I go, where am I like you that I could become like you?
Yeah.
If you've always been better, different, taller, funnier, smarter, whatever. This is where I do not connect with people who preach, who do not talk about struggle.
Yes.
I'm like,
absolutely.
Cool. Don't relate. Sorry.
Absolutely.
Victorious in all things.
No, and totally true. And if you've got a great idea, like you get asked to speak at a convention or a meeting or something like that, that's worked in your life, that idea has helped you overcome something that everybody is wrestling with. And if you don't just say, hey, you guys wrestle, say, we all wrestled with this. And in fact, I was the king of this. Let me tell you where I was digging in. And let me tell you what got me out of there. All of a sudden, you are so much more relatable. And you pick up those people. Now, here's the other thing, Andy. This is not a magic wand. Okay, so there are people in the audience that, regardless of what you say and how you say it, will not like you and will just say you did a bad job. And so those people you just can't worry about. But as much depends on you, this works. And so I can't stress enough that this book, like there are 5 books we'll probably end up going through all of them at some point that radically have altered and changed my life from a professional standpoint, and it resonates to other areas. And communicating for a change is absolutely one. I would, if there's a book, if anybody asks me, Wes, I want to speak better, I want to have a better flow, this is one you guys got to go get. And I recommend get it on the audiobook because he kind of tells a fun story at the beginning, and it's kind of neat to hear the inflections. So check that out.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny too. I've heard a few people that I know and respect also include that book. I mean, it's like $12 for the audio. And then you can get used copies at this point for $2.
Yeah.
Of a hard copy because it's just old.
Yeah.
But it's like, there's a lot of things that are old, i.e. 20, 25, 30 years old that are still true. Right. And I think it's one of those, it's a timeless communication tool.
Yeah.
Because it takes a lot of work to simplify things. And it's like, wow, it's so simple. He makes it sound so simple. And you should say, thank you. Thank you for making it really simple. Right. Because, we have phones that are very simple, quote unquote simple, but there's so much complexity that goes into making that simple.
Yes.
And so I hope that today we've been able to achieve that for you as well, for those listening or watching, that like, if you go, well, is it really just that simple? Do I just really have to answer those 4 questions? Yeah. And then say, thank you, goodbye.
Yes.
Go out to lunch or, I know we had 30 minutes for this meeting, but I only needed 15. What are your questions? Oh, that's it. Because better communicators don't write longer books, right? They write shorter and they don't give longer talks. They give shorter. One of the greatest examples of this, and it's a story that Mike Rowe, from Dirty Jobs, he tells a story in one of his books, but he tells a story about the person who spoke before Abraham Lincoln, when he gave, the Gettysburg Address, and the person who spoke before him spoke for like an hour and a half, and he was the most popular orator in America. And they almost didn't realize that Lincoln was like, he's done. That's it. Like I thought it was just his opening paragraph. You know what I mean? So again, but the reason we don't remember that guy's name before him is because we don't remember his name because he didn't simplify it. It takes a lot of work to make things simple. So Wes, thank you for making things simple. And we appreciate it. And I hope people pick up that book. Hope people will take this and implement it in their one-on-one conversations. And then if you want larger audiences, you need to get prepared for them. And so now's the time to do that. Wes, I'll give the last word to you.
Hey, no, I hope this is meaningful and relevant to what you guys are doing. Send us feedback because we love feedback. We love getting your success stories, where this showed up in your work and how it applied. So you please make sure you comment, you tell us how this is working in your lives, and send us those success stories because we love hearing about them. So have a great week.